Thank you for watching Satellite Preview 85, brought to you by Coltronics Incorporated and Luxor North America. If you missed any part of the program or just want to see it again, you'll have another chance next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. But the news and information have not ended for this evening. Stay tuned for Satellite Showtime, where you'll hear more people's perspectives on the issues of scrambling and zoning. Stay tuned. Good evening. Welcome to Satellite Showtime. I'm Pat Olson. If you're interested in the issues of zoning and scrambling, this is the show for you tonight. We'll give you several people's perspectives on the issues, and first we're going to give you an update on zoning. The Federal Communications Commission this summer is expected to act favorably on a proposed rule on zoning. That rule would preempt local zoning ordinances in cases where the zoning is overly restrictive. And here's an update on scrambling. The sponsors of two bills in Congress are still looking for co-sponsors for their bills. The bills are H.R. 1769, which calls for a 2-year moratorium on scrambling, and H.R. 1840, which calls for a fair marketing plan for scrambled programming. The Society for Private and Commercial Earth Stations, SPACE, has been encouraging people to write to their U.S. representatives in support of these bills. At Sat Expo 85 in Denver, Chuck Hewitt of SPACE told me more people should be writing.
I can tell you that you can put a lot of money into Washington, D.C., and your lobbyists can do a lot for you, but when it gets down to the bottom line, it's who writes their congressman, who contacts them. We had our dealer board in a few months ago who went and visited several congressmen, and I would say that probably had the greatest amount of impact of anything we've done to date. Individual visits would be number one. A personal handwritten letter has tremendous impact. If one congressman gets 10 handwritten letters on the same subject, he takes note. It has a tremendous impact. It has more impact than 1,000 form letters or even 10,000 form postcards. So the individual home owner and the dealer and his employees and his relatives and everyone should write their congressman, because more than ever we have to fight harder, because it's a harder battle now with the access question now no longer being a major concern. It's a harder problem to deal with the issue of distribution and reasonable fee.
So you're encouraging people to write to their congressperson and not the senators right now?
Well, no, the Senate bill, though, we think will be introduced within the next within this week or next week. And once that's introduced, then the Senate bill also.
Hewitt also told me SPACE plans to reach out to more people to try to get them to act in favor of the bills. You mentioned before the interview that there will be a press kit designed by SPACE for dealers.
Yes, we, as you know, as part of this whole problem, you know, there's a dual problem, the problem of the actual what's going to happen with scrambling and legislation in the legal area. Then there's the outside problem of negative PR that has been going on across the country, and in certain cases cable companies have taken out major advertisement and saying the skies are going dark and warning people about scrambling. So we've started a major public relations campaign, and as part of that campaign we will go in certain areas and blitz press. We've done it in Arkansas, and we just came back from Dallas, Texas. And what we do is we go in for 2 days, we do all the press media that we can do, both the print media and the video. And in fact, there we had 8 print media interviews and 3 television interviews. And then we try to pull the distributors and dealer together and try to encourage them to start doing things cooperatively, especially co-op advertising, and try to get them to understand where we stand on scrambling, and to ensure that they have the proper facts. In researching the area, we've found that some of the problem is that our dealers aren't as prepared as we'd like for them to be in knowing what's going on. And so as part of that, we're putting together a dealer press kit, and in that kit will be suggestions on how to deal with the local press, suggestions on what to do in certain circumstances, and we will take an article, or we'll take an advertisement, and we will go step by step on a way in which you can deal with that kind of advertisement or that kind of program. We hope to have fact sheets in there showing you know, what's available if you don't have the premium programmers and networks. What things are up there to better promote, you know, the vast amount of programming that's up there without the premium programmers. We hope to pull together a better set of facts and make sure that the dealer understands we are available for press interviews from local press. And we're also available to help them to make sure they understand the facts properly. We want to make sure that we represent the facts accurately because we're on the right side. I mean, that's the nice thing about our industry. I mean, we're for free enterprise. We're for making sure that every consumer has access to all programming. We're for reasonable fees and reasonable costs. I mean, that's the right side to be on. So we want to make sure our facts are right because we don't want to be bad guys because we misstate our facts. Because if our facts are right, we're on the right side. So we want to make sure that all of our dealers understand that. And they understand things like scrambling. You know, scrambling is here. Scrambling is going to stay. It's going to be, it has to protect the premium programmers have to protect their signal. And it's the only way they can do it. And all we're saying is that let's limit it to those who have to protect their signals, and let's ensure that there's reasonable fees and open distribution.
Now let's go to the phones to hear what our viewers are thinking.
I'm a dealer, and I wanted to thank you a lot for the show.
Now, I'm 64 years old and I'm a widow, and I got the satellite because it's good company and it keeps you up with everything going on in the world. And my hobby, more or less, is news.
Do you know anybody who's really scared by HBO?
No, I don't. Not really. Well, I really don't watch it that much. You know, I watch a little bit of everything, but shoot, I'd never really care if they scrambled it or not.
I just want to make a comment about the HBO plan for scrambling. I've never heard of a more ridiculous scheme. It really sounds like they do not have our interests at heart at all. I can't make an analogy enough to say that the cable companies, in order to accomplish a similar relationship, would have to ask all of their users to buy all of the cable company's equipment and then turn around and charge them so much a month for the privilege of watching HBO.
We want to thank all the viewers who have called, especially those from the Canadian provinces. If you want to call us tonight, you can call toll-free at 1-800-826-5285. And if you can't reach us by that number, there are two other numbers. They are 608-647-4246 and 608-647-8902. Coming up, a couple of people have a suggestion for cable companies. That's when Satellite Showtime continues.
Welcome to the world of Satellite TV Opportunities, the magazine that brings you inside information on successful marketing and sales techniques, details the latest in new technology, and lets you see how other dealers increase their sales and profits.
Satellite TV Opportunities magazine is the marketing techniques magazine for satellite TV dealers. Our single purpose is to help dealers increase their sales and their profits through improved marketing techniques.
Satellite TV Opportunities offers insight into the latest trends in marketing, profiles thriving businesses, and surveys what TVRO buyers are really after. Subscribe today by calling 1-800-922-2812. For $25, you get a full year's subscription to Satellite TV Opportunities, a magazine full of new ideas that will help your business thrive. 1-800-922-2812. Call today. MasterCard and Visa accepted.
Speaking at a seminar in Denver, here's attorney Fred Finn of Brown & Finn to tell why it was necessary to get a law on the books to protect the home satellite system owner.
Our firm represents, among other people, SPACE, which is the Trade Association of Home Satellite Earth Station Manufacturers, Dealers, and Distributors. So the point in the Cable Act that we were particularly concerned with were those provisions which changed ancient Section 605 to new Section 705. Section 605 is the basic piracy statute. It says, and if you've ever tried to read it, it's kind of like reading the tax code. It is long and involved and needlessly complicated, which is because of its origins. But it says, basically, that it is against the law to receive and make use of, or intercept and divulge, communications other than those which are transmitted for use of the general public. Its origins go all the way back to the turn of the century and the Berlin Radio Convention in 1909, in which a bunch of nations got together and were concerned about the privacy of wireless telegraphy. And they agreed to each have their own internal law, which followed the line of it's all right to passively receive communications, but you can't make use of the contents of that communications or divulge its existence. That was taken over into the Radio Acts in about 1912, carried over into the Communications Act of 1934, pretty much with the same language. And immediately in 1934, the courts started to expand the interpretation of what that law was actually designed to do. Originally, again, designed to protect, for example, telephone company employees who would overhear a conversation, saying it's okay to overhear it, to passively overhear it, but you cannot make use of the contents of that communications or divulge its existence to a third party. The courts first in the 30s and the 40s took Section 605 and used it as a rule of evidence to exclude evidence that was obtained by federal officials illegally, for example, without a proper warrant for a wiretap, saying that that evidence was obtained in violation of Section 605, therefore you couldn't use it in a prosecution of that trial. Later, in the 60s, it was expanded to encompass the sale of equipment which could pick up closed-circuit or Muzak type of transmissions. In the 70s, there were two major cases, 70s and 80s, applying Section 605 to prevent the marketing and sale of pay television decoders, the Chartwell Case and National Subscription Television. Also, there were at least a dozen injunctions based on the Section 605 theory against the unauthorized sale of MDS, that's multi-point distribution service, microwave down converters. So it was with that background that we, on behalf of SPACE, started to look at the writing on the wall, and the statute was getting interpreted more broadly and more broadly. We felt that some clarification was required in the statute so that you didn't have a 1906 law governing a 1980s technology. And we went in and fortunately had found some folks who were very interested in this issue in the Congress who didn't want this ancient law to be applied to the reception of satellite communications. Senator Goldwater and the Senate introduced S-2437, and Congressman Gore, now Senator Gore, introduced H.R. 5176. The purpose of that legislation, this is not now 1984, was to make it clear in the case of both bills that the non-commercial reception of satellite cable programming in the privacy of one's home violated no law. In the case of the Gore bill, the senator took it one step further and said if you do scramble, then you have to deal fairly with homeowners. Those two bills were introduced in '84. The Cable Telecommunications Policy Act had been debated for 3 or 4 years previously. It looked like it was going to move, and the best way to get some legislation through Congress is if you can jump on a horse that's already riding towards the finish line. So in the waning months of the last Congress, Congressman Gore and Senator Goldwater were able to have those provisions, the provision that says doesn't violate any law for an individual to view unscrambled programming in the privacy of your home, provided there's no marketing system for that programming. Those provisions included in the Cable Policy Act, which basically clarified that home dish reception under existing circumstances doesn't violate the law. Left for another day was the issue of what about scrambling? What happens if people scramble? There had been, during this period of time, 4 efforts to outlaw home satellite dishes. Previous to that, there had also been a case brought by Multimedia Cable against Starlink Communications in Wichita, Kansas, alleging that what the satellite dealer was doing was violating 605 by the sale of home earth station equipment. So that was the backdrop.
Immediately after that legislation passed, some cable companies threatened the skies would go dark. That caused concern in Congress and led to the introduction of H.R. 1769 and H.R. 1840. 1769 calls for a 2-year moratorium on scrambling, and H.R. 1840 calls for a fair marketing plan for programming. We'll hear more from Mr. Finn later on a different issue. The keynote speaker at SAT Expo 85 was Nicholas Johnson, a former FCC commissioner, author, professor, and public radio commentator. He told me if cable companies are worried that satellite TV will steal some of their customers, they could do themselves a favor. You indicated in your speech that cable sometimes could do itself some good, and your advice to cable would be maybe what?
Well, cable is essentially, technologically, an obsolete delivery system. I mean, you're wiring up nations at a cost of billions of dollars, and you get the job done, you say, we forgot to put in a switching system. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You know, now we're going to have to rewire again through the telephone companies' kinds of networks with switching systems to do this properly. You've got the capacity to receive programming on a satellite dish. You don't need a cable to do that. It's much more efficient to go to home satellite dishes than to distribute over cable systems. So the question is, what can cable do that really is unique, that is something that would preserve it from attacks and erosion and bankruptcy? And one of the things it can do is local programming. Encouraging people, putting cameras in schools and union halls and churches and civic associations, going out with an outreach program, bring people in and train them in how to operate this equipment, make equipment available, make time available on the system, and really develop meaningful local programs. The broadcasters who've done that, whose local news program blocks of an hour, 2 hours a night, are selling. Advertisers want that time because people in the community want to know what's happening in the community. It's proved very profitable for the local broadcasters. So I think the cable operators are really shooting themselves in the foot when they try to cut off these local access channels, give people crummy equipment, make the hours short, charge them a lot to use it, discourage in every way the creation of local community programming. I think they're just driving the cable industry from technological obsolescence into economic obsolescence. And the sooner they learn that and really do a genuine job of producing local programming, the less real problem they've got out there in the marketplace. Because as it is, 50% of the people who had cable and then get a satellite dish keep the cable. And how much better off they'd be if they could keep that percentage up there by offering people something they really want and need.
Taylor Howard couldn't agree more that cable should capitalize on its strengths. Howard is chairman of the Space Board of Directors and founder of Chaparral Communications.
For instance, cable can provide local news, local events that you can't get any other way. A dish can provide sports like the Philadelphia team when you live in California, things that cable will never be interested in providing. So it's a natural that they go together. We see many people now getting dishes. About 40% of the industry's sales are in cabled areas. We see many of those people keeping their cable basic service, using the dish for the premium service, using the dish for things cable can't provide them.
Remember to call us tonight with your questions or comments. Our phone numbers are 800-826-5285 and 608-647-4246 and 608-647-8902. We heard from space attorney Fred Finn a few minutes ago. Coming up on Satellite Showtime, we'll hear from him again when he'll tell us how many cities are considering adopting zoning ordinances.
Want to know more about satellite TV? Then go to the source for product reviews and how-tos. We're on the road and out in space, and sometimes in very cold places, with features and technical reports. It's all in Satellite TV. That's only $19.95 for 12 big issues of STV magazine. Call now, 1-800-438-2020, and get this LCD calendar clock free with your subscription. That's 12 big issues of STV Magazine and the clock for only $19.95. The number again is 1-800-438-2020. 1-800-438-2020. Call now.
At Denver, space attorney Fred Finn gave a seminar audience some background on zoning.
Zoning is an area, and unreasonable zoning ordinances are things that have been tried by more than one or two communities throughout the country. The last count that we had on behalf of space were some 750 communities. We're looking at adopting ordinances, had ordinances on the books specifically governing home satellite antennas, or had a general ordinance that applied to the installation of a home satellite antenna. The types of ordinances one runs into are as varied as the ingenuity of man or woman, him or herself. We have setback requirements, height restrictions, diameter restrictions, requirements that the antenna has to be shielded 360 degrees, types of foliage that has to be planted to shield the antenna. And I thought I might just go through a couple of some of the ordinances that we have recently brought to the FCC's attention. We have Terrace Park, Ohio, we have a complete ban. Puyallup, Washington, we have a setback requirement which is 10 feet for every 1 foot of dish diameter. So if you have a 10-foot dish, you've got a 100-foot setback. In that community, that works as a practical ban on dish installations. Westlake, Ohio, satellite receiving dishes are only okay at churches and schools. Now Baltimore takes a little different approach. Baltimore, you can install a dish, if it's solid, no bigger than 4 feet. If it's mesh, you can go up to 6 feet in most areas. But if you are a bar or a restaurant, you've got no problem up to a 12-foot diameter dish. Now, explain the rationale for that. I think it's, in actuality, I think it's some strong political power in the parts of the bars and restaurants. There have been a few in the Baltimore area who've suggested it was an effort to improve community spirits. Move on to Aspen, Colorado, nearby. Anything over 2 feet in diameter requires a conditional use permit, which costs around $680. Agora Hills, California, $1,055 permit fee. Chicago has an interesting ordinance that claims that satellite dishes are planned developments. So in order to get a permission to put the dish in, I see the gentleman down here nodding, you must have had the problem. You've got to go through about 3 or 4 hearing processes. It was put in effect, in the words of Alderman Pushinsky, I believe that's the height, Pushinsky, to protect the cable television company, a franchisee. Chaska, Minnesota, complete ban on satellite antennas greater than 1 meter in diameter. Total visual screening from adjacent residential public properties and streets. City Council dictates what screening material is appropriate. Ordinance permits ground and roof-supported radio and TV antennas up to 40 feet or 10 feet above roof line. I could go on and on and on, which I won't do. The point is, it is a problem for the home satellite dish industry nationally. It is, it's really a result of two sometimes conflicting, but in the long run should not be conflicting interests. The right of the community to adopt ordinances, zoning ordinances, based on the police power, namely the right to protect the health and safety of the residents of the community, and to a limited extent also the aesthetics of that community. And that's where the major bone of contention comes. How much can a local ordinance be based on a desire to protect the aesthetics of the community? How do you judge the aesthetics of the community? Isn't that terribly subjective? Doesn't it change over time? I may not like the look of an antenna now, and in a couple of years I get used to it. It doesn't bother me. I may not like the shape of a satellite dish antenna, but I like a regular TV antenna. Who knows? There is some legitimate interest in the aesthetic area, and it's got to be balanced, in our view, against the interest of the home satellite earth station owner to access multiple sources of information and ideas. I think that's a First Amendment right under the Constitution. And where that balancing comes out is where ultimately the zoning issue is going to come out. Now, the whole problem really did not start until about 2 years ago. Up until that time, 95–98% of the dish installations had been done in rural areas in which there were seldom any zoning problems. But 2 years ago, the problem did start, and Space, the trade association, decided to combat it.
Finn said Space has decided to fight restrictive local zoning on 3 fronts: through education, case-by-case litigation, and federal relief, or a proposed rule to preempt overly restrictive zoning ordinances. Finn told about an overly restrictive ordinance in Coral Gables, Florida.
It's just a ban. You couldn't have them. At the same time, there were no restrictions on traditional television antennas and virtually none on amateur radio antennas. And the judge in the circuit court in Florida looked at that and said, wait a minute, I don't see any rational basis for this rule. You have no satellite antennas are allowed, but you have no restrictions on these other antennas, some of which could be bigger than, smaller than, prettier than, uglier than satellite dish antennas. And it doesn't make any sense to have that kind of complete ban on. And he overturned the ordinance. And that's really the only one that has come to any stage of anything percolated far up the judicial system.
Finn gave some advice to people who have been unable to get a dish because of zoning.
Well, I think that the best thing always is to to try to work with your local community to get a reasonable ordinance that balances their interests with your own interests. I also think it's a good idea to maybe get some of your neighbors or satellite retailers in the area to come in and help you and to work with the zoning board. Zoning is a very local kind of issue, and it's one in which most zoning boards respond to local interest and local concern.
In his final comment on this program, Fred Finn tells about a covenant restriction, a problem he says, in a way, is even greater than traditional zoning restrictions.
These are provisions in the deed of the property that you buy as a homeowner. You go in, you buy a piece of property, and in the deed to that property it says, no people in this subdivision can install outside antennas or can install structures without the approval of the neighborhood committee of some type or another. Those are harder to attack than a traditional zoning ordinance because the courts have traditionally taken the approach, hey, look, this is a matter of private contract. If you didn't like the provision in the contract, you didn't have to buy the house. The only time that I know of that attacks have been successfully made on that type of ordinance has been, on that type of covenant restriction, has been when either a lot of time has passed since the restriction was put into place and the restriction no longer makes any sense, or the community has ignored enforcing the restriction in a number of different areas and now they're trying to selectively enforce it against you.
Coming up on Satellite Showtime, you'll meet 2 more exhibitors from Sat Expo 85.
For a limited time only, you can receive Channel Guide for a special reduced rate. For just $9, you will receive 8 weeks of Channel Guide, a month of Galaxy One magazine, and the all-new 1985 Whole Earth Station catalog. That's a $20 value for just $9. Enclose check and address, and you'll start receiving the original grid format for satellite TV. Due to this low price, no phone orders may be taken. Write today. Channel Guide, Department 808A, P.O. Box 1633, Englewood, Colorado, 80150. Do it today.
Now let's go back to Denver and Sat Expo 85. I'm talking now with Ed Parker, who is National Sales Manager for Houston Tracker Company. Welcome to Satellite Showtime, Ed.
Thank you, Pat.
Can you tell me, when people stop at your booth, what do they look at first?
Well, normally, Pat, they're attracted to the units that are on display, our antenna positioners, and of course our mini dish over here that demonstrates how the positioners actually work.
Now, some people think that there may be such a thing as a mini dish, that it's a working phenomenon, but is it?
No, it's really not. The mini dish was designed to demonstrate the antenna positioners and how an antenna actually works, and also demonstrate the polar rotor control. To kind of give you an idea, we'll operate the mini dish and make it work.
Oh.
So it gives you kind of an idea of what an actual antenna would do, although it's not functional as far as receiving a signal.
So how has your reception been at the Satellite Expo 85?
Actually, we've been very pleased with the reception of our products. We have a new product out. It's our new Tracker 5 that is our most sophisticated antenna positioner and is designed to not only position the antenna but to take over full control of the satellite receiver as well and give you complete remote control of the entire system.
When people stop at your booth, do you find that they're very hungry for information?
Yes, we do. We find that a lot of times they have very little knowledge of what an antenna positioner does or receiver, and we really try to spend a lot of time with them and explaining the entire system to them.
Are you planning to attend future shows?
Oh, we certainly are. We'll be at the CES show in Chicago. We'll also be at the upcoming Space STTI show in Tulsa and in Nashville also.
I'm speaking now with Denise Weber, who is from Phantom Engineering in Morgan Hill, California. And Denise, can you tell me what Phantom Engineering does?
Primarily, we manufacture TVRO accessories and field test equipment.
What kind of accessories?
Filtering devices and security systems.
Could you tell me how the company got the name Phantom Engineering? I'm very curious about that.
Certainly. The founders of our company, Darrell Anderson, Bill Goldsmith, and Bob Dalton, all worked behind the scenes in TVRO for a number of years. And because they were behind the scenes, when they decided to start their own business, manufacturing, they came out, and that's where we got our name.
What do you see for the future of the company Phantom Engineering?
I see us being involved basically the way we are now, manufacturing TVRO accessories. There's always the possibility, of course, that we could get into the complete system end of it. Certainly we do a lot of work for other companies, subcontracting, design, and engineering. But as of this time, we don't plan on coming out with anything on our own. We just pretty much plan to stay the way we are now.
So you work for a lot of other companies. To whom do you sell?
There's distributors. We have a very good distributor base at this point in time.
Okay, I want to thank you so much, Denise Weber of Phantom Engineering. Coming up next, the Calltronics video newsletter with Joe Kelch.
Are you confused about satellite programming guides? Are you tired of monthly inaccurate guides that are big and bulky and about as much fun to use as a city phone book? How about tabloids with hard-to-read print, incomplete movie listings that are about as easy to use as a road map? Or newspaper guides with confusing grids that fall apart in your hands? There is an alternative. Onset, the easy-to-read, easy-to-use weekly programming guide with more movies and sports. Best of all, Onset is only $39. That's right, 52 issues for only $39. But don't take our word for it. We'll send you a free copy of Onset, and you can judge for yourself. And if you're a dealer, ask about our dealer program. Make your customers happy and make money. Call Onset now. Toll-free 1-800-438-2020 or write Onset, Box 2347, Shelby, North Carolina, 28150. Onset, you've seen the rest, now try the best.
Good evening and welcome to Video Newsletter by Calltronics. Well, first of all, this evening we want to thank you sincerely and express our great thanks for the backing and the response on the viewer survey from those of you who want to know more about Calltronics products, and those who gave us endorsements because of satisfaction with our line of stainless steel and Trans 10 mesh antennas. We really appreciated that. Now, if you have comments about any product shown on this program, please write, phone, or even mention them personally at the next trade show to representatives of the advertising firms. We know that they'll appreciate it also. The Trans 10 by Qualtronics. This eye-appealing transparent antenna has passed the stringent test of the McDonnell Douglas Corporation. It's approved for 2-degree spacing. In the words of McDonnell Douglas, the performance of the Trans 10 is equal to or greater than that of other antennas of similar size and construction. Not only does the Trans 10 perform, it's also covered by a 5-year limited warranty, and it's easy to look at. Its baked acrylic thermoset black finish gives it a low luster appeal. Yes, the Trans 10 is also built for strength. The patented rib design assures maximum reflector signal and better retention of panels in high wind areas. Independent tests have indicated that the Trans 10 will withstand wind velocities up to 90 miles per hour. The Trans 10 by Qualtronics, high in performance and strength, UPS shippable anywhere in the United States, an antenna for every season. In addition to those names of the distributors nationally for the Trans 10, we'd like to add this one personally. It's National CompuSat of Prairie View, Kansas, and their numbers are on the screen. Well, the Qualtronics serial number contest is rolling right along. Our latest winning number is number 5281. That's number 5281. Check your Qualtronics system mount. The serial number is on that mount decal. If you find number 5281 on your system decal, copy the words from the decal plus the winning number and send it along with your name and address to serial number, Qualtronics Incorporated, Route 2, Richland Center, Wisconsin, 53581. And the winning prize, the windbreaker, will be on its way.
Luxor, space-age technology at an affordable price. Satellite receivers, antenna actuators, remote controls, and auxiliary sensors, all by Luxor. Here's a totally integrated satellite television reception system. The Luxor 9550 remote, controlled satellite receiver. 24 channels selected, fine-tuned, programmed for automatic recall. 4 different audio systems, built-in RF modulator, automatic polarization, 2-speed scan, video inversion control, AFC defeat, and Dolby noise reduction and more. The Luxor 9534 antenna actuator automatic satellite selection by remote control, all at the touch of a button, remarkable ease and accuracy. And the Luxor Mark II, a high-performance block satellite television receiver system, several sets, each having their own independent channel selection at the same time, from a single antenna. That's the Mark II. Just a few of the high-performance, technically advanced satellite products from Luxor.
In response to many callers' requests for more technical issues on our program, we're expanding it right now. Here's Tech Corner with Dale Davenport.
Hello, this is Dale again in the Tech Corner, and today I'm going to go over LNAs and what they're supposed to do and how to test them in the field. Now, as you can see here I have a typical LNA. Now, an LNA is simply a broadband amplifier for the baseband of 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz, and this is the frequency range coming from the satellite. And your LNA is supposed to provide you with a set amount of gain, and this gain ranges anywhere from 35 to 50 dB of gain, depending upon what you need for your down converter. Now, the LNA should provide this gain while introducing the least amount of noise possible onto the signal. And there's a noise rating stamped on most of your LNAs. It's in degrees Kelvin, and the lower this temperature rating is, the less noise that the LNA will introduce into the system when it's providing its amplification. Now, just the opposite of that is the larger the degree Kelvin rating, as in say 120, the more noise the LNA will introduce into the system. Now, typically the lower rated LNAs will be used on smaller dishes, and a larger dish provides enough gain that you can get away with using, say, a 120 degree LNA versus an 80 degree. Now, the LNA requires two things to operate properly. First, it must receive the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz baseband from the satellite, and secondly, it must be supplied with a certain amount of power to operate, the B+ voltage. Now, the baseband input, as I said, comes from the satellite, and the way to ensure that that is getting there is to make sure that your polar rotor is situated at the focal point, that your elevation angle is set correctly, that your azimuth angle is set correctly, that your declination angle is set correctly, and also that your north-south orientation is correct. Then, if you have set up all of these angles correctly, you should be able to find a satellite and obtain the baseband feed that the LNA requires. Now, the second thing that is required by the LNA is the B+ voltage that it needs to operate on. This is typically 15 to 20 volts DC. And that can be measured right at the input, right at this point on your LNA. And another thing you should check if you suspect a bad LNA is how much current is this LNA drawing, and this can also be tested at this point, which I will show in just a few minutes. Now, signs of a bad LNA can be anything from no picture at all, when everything else, checks out fine, to what I call bug fights, which is just a lot of snow or a very snowy picture. Now, also you can have, say, a very sparkly picture when you know the system should be operating better than what it is, and you've tested the other components, and everything is tested out good with the exception of the LNA, and yet you still get a lot of sparkles. This could be due to a weak LNA. Now, another thing, I have seen LNAs go bad, say, just on the upper end, and where, say, channels 1 through 15 look just fine, but then you get up in, say, 17, 18, 20, and so on, then the picture's not so good. Or just the opposite, the upper channels could be good and the lower channels be bad. And I've even seen them where 1 through 5 is good and 15 through 20, but the midband is gone. So as an LNA gets weak, it may not die totally. You just may see that part of the baseband won't be amplified as well or with as less noise as what the rest of the band is. Now, I'll show you a couple tests you can do in the field. One, you must make sure that the B+ voltage going to the LNA is being supplied to it. As I said earlier, that can be tested right where the cable connects on to the LNA. right now I have this hooked up to a Luxor unit, and the Luxor supplies 18 volts through the down converter to the LNA. This can be tested by using your voltmeter. I have mine set on the 20 volt scale, and I ground the outside probe to the outside of the cable, and the other test lead I hit the center conductor of the cable, and I see my meter reads 16.57. So I am getting the voltage supplied to the LNA that it needs. And if I reconnect the LNA, and dial up the correct channel, I can see that it does in fact work. Now, if you do not have a picture and your B+ voltage is not present, then somewhere on down the line, say the down converter or the receiver, is not supplying that voltage here. Now, if you don't have it at this end of the cable, you can go directly to where this cable connects onto the down converter and check it there. If it's coming out of the down converter but it's not making it through the cable, then you obviously do have a bad cable. Now, the other thing to check, if you are getting voltage at this point and yet you're not getting any picture, is to check the amount of current that the LNA is drawing. Typically, this measurement will be below 120 or 130 or so. The way to do this, you must change your meter setting to read milliamps. I'm going to the 200 milliamp scale. Now, the meter, when you're measuring current, must be in line with the flow of current. So again, I will disconnect at the back of the LNA. Now, you must have a small wire jumper. This is to make your ground connection. I'll clip one to the ground at the input to the LNA, and connect the other side of the jumper to the cable ground to ensure that I do have a constant ground path. Okay, once you have completed your ground path, you must now take one probe and connect it to the center conductor of the cable, and the other center probe to the center conductor going to the LNA. Okay, once you do have your ground path secured, to measure current, you'll take one probe and put it out of the center conductor of the cable, and the other probe and put it to the center conductor going to the LNA. And as I do that, I not only gain a picture, but I see that this LNA is drawing approximately 73 milliamps worth of current. Now, if this reading is substantially higher than, say, 120 or 130 milliamps, you know that you do have a problem in your LNA. Now again, some things to check in the field if you suspect an LNA problem is to make sure that you do have a good signal hitting the LNA. And this can be done by ensuring that your polar rotor is located at the focal point, that your elevation, azimuth, declination angles are all set correctly, and that your north-south orientation is set correctly. Now, to check the voltage, again, you check at the output of the cable and you check for an 18 volts. This is done by going to the voltage scale, and the appropriate voltage scale, I'm reading 20 volts at this time. You put the negative to the case of the cable and measure to the center conductor, and I see 16.5 volts. Now, to check current again, you must go to the milliamp reading, switch to the appropriate mode, ensure that you do have a ground path from the cable to the LNA, and then take your amp meter and attach one probe to the center conductor of the cable and the other to the center conductor of the LNA. Okay, it now appears that the LNA is drawing 84 milliamps, and we do have a good reading. Now, those are the things to check if you suspect an LNA problem. An LNA problem could exist if you have bug fights for a picture, or if you have a very weak picture, or if the upper channels are considerably worse than the lower channels, or vice versa. And by just using a simple voltmeter, amp meter, you can do the tests I've described here. And if at any point, if you are getting B plus up there but no picture, or if it's drawing an excessively large amount of current, I would next replace the LNA and see if that makes a difference, and if at that point you do get a picture. Now next week I'll be going over the down converter and how the power for the LNA is routed through the down converter, and be going over more of the system. So until next time, this is Dale in the Tech Corner, and we'll see you next time.
Well, that's it for our video newsletter for this evening. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be seeing you next week for Video Newsletter.
Thank you, Joe. Remember, our phone lines are still open if you want to call with a comment or question. Our numbers are 800-826-5285 and 608-647-4246 and 647-8902. Time is running out if you want to attend the Midwest Satellite Dish Energy Conservation Expo in Cincinnati. That's going on May 31st, June 1st, and 2nd. If you want to attend, you should contact Joyce Jensen. Her phone number is 602-581-0188. We at Satellite Showtime will be at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago next week. We hope to see you there. And if you missed part or all of the panel discussion Satellite Preview 85 tonight, you can see it again next week. Catch it next week, that's Tuesday, at 8 p.m. Eastern, Satcom 4, Transponder 22. Until then, good night.
of rigid extruded aluminum anchored securely to the ribs and center hub to form a solid framework for the panels. The mesh panels are of expanded flattened aluminum with a 1.040 thickness and 0.045 strand width. The mesh in all exposed frame parts have a baked acrylic thermoset finish. All antenna hardware is plated for weather protection. The Trans 10, with its 10-foot diameter, is designed for maximum gain, a focal length of 44 1/4 inches and an FD ratio of 0.375. The Trans 10 is UPS shippable anywhere in the United States with a weight of 145 pounds without mount. It means easy handling. Without a doubt, the Trans 10 by Qualtronics is the front runner in the industry, the ultimate mesh antenna design because of quality, performance, and eye appeal. In addition to the numbers and names that we just showed on our distributor list, here's an additional one for National CompuSat Incorporated, this one in Kansas. It's Box 383, Prairie View, Kansas 67664. The number 913-973-2777, or in-state 800-232-0015. Qualtronics is also very proud of the dealers who handle the stainless steel antennas. Here's their listing. For this beautiful poster that enhances any sales room or den, simply call the number listed on the screen or contact your nearest distributor. That's our show for this evening. We'll be with you again the same time next week for the video newsletter by Qualtronics.
That's all for this evening's Satellite Showtime. If you would like a VHS or beta copy of our program, please send a check or money order for $19.95 to Nova Video Productions, Box 637, Highway 14 East, Richland Center, Wisconsin, 53581. No credit cards or CODs accepted. And our phone number is 608-647-4246 in case you would have any comments about the program. That's all for this evening's Satellite Showtime. On next week's program, you can look forward to more of our special panel discussion, Satellite Preview 85, where the topic will turn to battles the satellite industry has had to fight. Until then, good night.